Hello, welcome back to your tutor training. In the last video, we talked about 4 different areas that make a good teacher. In this video, we're going to look at some case studies, some real-life quotations from students, and learn about these 4 areas from the students. As we do so, I want to share this quote with you and have you keep it in mind as we look at their words. This is a quote from J.P. Bishop, who is a researcher in Texas, and she said, "What we learn in school is much more than the disciplines of mathematics, reading, history, and science. We learn who we are. And these identities, in turn, affect not only how we learn or fail to learn the subject matter at hand, but also who we become, what we pursue, what makes us happy, and what we find meaningful." As we look at these students' words in the next few slides, I want you to consider what has led up to this point. Their education and their experiences in learning have taught them who they are and who they will become, what they find meaningful. Your students will be very different, and what they find meaningful will be different for each one. So we have these 4 basic areas, but it's easier to see if we think about these students as individuals. Let's review the 4 areas of a good teacher before we look at the quotes. The first area you discussed in the last video was knowledge. This was content knowledge, but specifically relevant content knowledge to be able to help the students in different ways. The second was teaching, a motivation for teaching that is student focused. The third was a relationship with the student, caring for them and showing charity the way that Christ would. And the last area you discussed was involvement. This is knowing when to be highly involved with the student or when to have a low-level involvement for the student's optimal growth. Keep these 4 areas in mind as we look at some quotes. I asked these students who had been a negative influence on learning math. Sometimes it was a parent, sometimes it was a friend. Most of the time it was a teacher, which makes sense. Teachers are very involved in education. The first quote says, "She was one of those ladies who only had one teaching style, and if you asked a question, she would repeat her answer, and you're like, well, I don't get that way." It's obvious to see this student's frustration with the teacher. This teacher had content knowledge, but maybe not relevant content knowledge. She wasn't able to diversify her teaching styles or her answers to the questions to help the students to learn in different ways. And because of that, it affected the relationship that the teacher had with the student. The student could tell that the teacher was not caring for them in a way that would help them to learn. So also you can see kind of how these 4 different areas are intertwined. The second quote says, "I felt like a baby in her class, like I didn't feel like an equal learning participant with her." This is a very interesting quote, especially these 3 words right here, equal learning participant. The student wanted to be able to see the teacher learning too, and to learn from that. When the student and teacher are equal, it definitely helps that relationship to come about because the student can feel like they are important as well. The third quote kind of reinforces the last one, and it was in fact the same student. She said, "Everyone wants to be treated kind of like they know what they're doing." Again, you want to be able to give the student a level of involvement themselves so that they feel like they're empowered. Next, let's look at some quotes about positive influences on learning math. Again, all about teachers. The student said, "It feels like they're learning it with you, even though you know that they know. But when they teach, it feels like they're also learning with you." Again, it's very important for a teacher to be a learner as well. Acting as a learner yourself as a tutor will give the students confidence that they can learn like you have learned, and it will build your relationship because you will be on equal ground with them. This student said, "That's a big thing for me to do well in a class, is getting along with the teacher. If I don't, then I don't ever do well in a class." This seems a little bit extreme. The student is speaking of her relationship with the teacher, but also saying that that affects her academic success. A lot of your students will feel that way if they don't have a friend in the teacher or in you, then they're going to feel like they can't be successful. This next quote says, "When they personally connect with students instead of just making me a number on a clipboard, I always appreciate that." Again, the student needs to feel important. Your students are going to be going through a lot in math class and outside of math class. A lot of students during their first or second semester experienced a lot of depression and anxiety and stress with a new environment and with a new way of learning. So when they come to you for help in a math class, for example, they need to feel like they're in control and they need to feel important because maybe everything else in their life is telling them that they're not. They need to have a safe place with you in that tutoring session, and that is so important to them. I hope you've enjoyed looking at some of these quotes. I know that the 4 areas of a good teacher can be a little bit easy to talk about in generalities, but hard to see in specifics and to really know what your students need. I wanted to share one more quote from a student with you. This is from a student. I asked her the question, do you think that people are just born bad at math and can never improve, or that they can improve? And here's what she had to say. "There's always somebody out there who's going to make sense to you, no matter what, I think. Because everybody's different, but you're going to find somebody, a friend, or somebody that's going to make sense to you. So I don't think there's anybody that's just born bad at math and will never be good at it." Some of the students that you come across will have this mindset that there's some people who are good at math and some people that are bad at math, and they're just going to feel like they're set up for failure if they feel they're born bad at math. But to them, you can be that one person who's going to make sense to them, that friend. And that is so important. You are so important, and you're going to help them so much. Remember these 4 areas, but most of all, remember to follow the Spirit and to know what they need and how to respond to them. And listen to them. This is one more quote I want to leave you with from another researcher, Sonia Nieto. She says, "Students have important lessons to teach educators, and we need to begin to listen to them more carefully." As you listen to your students, maybe you'll forget what the 4 areas of the good teacher are, but that's okay. As you listen to them, you will remember and you will know how to help them. And the Spirit will definitely help you to do that. Always guide your tutoring sessions with prayer, and you will be blessed for that. I hope you've enjoyed this video and looking at some real quotes from students, and remember to learn from them, and they will teach you, maybe even more than you will teach them.